D25G. We got to pull the tracks on both sides. Well, just get them loose and then pull the lower rollers out and put new rollers on one side. We're going to take any good roller we can and put on the other side. He's trying to go way cheap, but that's what it is. The other thing we got going on, you can hear the pump making a bunch of noise. You got two pumps here. You got one that runs your blade, one runs your ripper, and the other one's going to go to your torque converter and your transmission. And what happens is, see this hose here goes up. There's a suction filter up by the hydraulic tank, and then it goes to a suction filter, and then it comes back around into this hose and sucks out of the rear end. And then this tank, this is a two-section pump, so it's pumping out, it's sucking out of the bottom of the transmission too, which I think is probably going. I have to look at the hose on the top, but I got a feeling the top hoses are probably going to the torque converter. But as you can see, the crimp fitting up there is loose, and I guarantee you that crimp fitting, and this one too. See where it's real wet right here around the crimp. That hose, those are suction hoses, and they're sucking air. And you don't want to do that because that'll make your hydraulic pump cavitate. And the other bad thing is, you know, there's probably a $20,000 torque converter sitting in there, so you won't want to ruin your converter. So that's where we're at on this, and we'll just keep informing you as we go along here.
Alright guys, it's been a little bit since I've made a video here. I'm going to start making some more videos now. This spring has been crazy because it stayed cold for so long and wet for so long. I mean, the rain would not stop, and we were freezing every night, clear up till May, and it's just been a really crazy spring. And then of course, you know, for about 2 weeks it warmed up, and then that little bit of good weather, then things, you know, everybody's trying to plant. Then the woods thawed out on the logging stuff and dried up to where those guys could get back in the woods, and I was getting hit from the logging end and the farming end with all my customers. Everything was happening at once. I was starting at leaving the house at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, getting home at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and just running ragged. I just didn't even have time to do any videos. I just was trying to keep up with everything that was going on. But anyway, what's going on with this machine here? This is a Dresser TD25G International, same thing. It's when Dresser took over for International when International was going under. These are really good machines. The guy that owns this one actually says that he has a D8K too. He says that this one it'll outwork the D8K in the gravel pit. So he really likes it. It's got a 3-speed power shift, just like a Cat. You know, really good, nice machine. Really smooth controls. I really like running this one. It's a nice machine. But what I'm doing here is I'm jacking the machine off the ground here. We're gonna just run the tracks around here to where I can get the alligators in the right spot up there by the front idler where I want them. And that's one thing that's really nice about a machine that's got a ripper and a blade on it. You can just lift the whole machine off the ground. A lot of guys will say, oh, you got to change lower rollers, you got to pull the undercarriage out. You don't have to pull the undercarriage out. Just break the track, flop it down off your lower, you know, the lower part of it off the front idler. And if you get it off the ground like this, you can unbolt them, let them flop down on the rails, the old rollers, and then roll them out. You'll have to, these rollers here probably weigh a good 150, 170 pounds a piece. So basically I just roll them up there and I get them rolled up onto the rail, and then I just use the Cat. If you're by yourself, it takes quite a bit of getting in and out of the Cat and lowering it up and down to where you can, you know, get your bolt holes lined up, but it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to lift them up in there by hand and get the bolt started. So and another thing that's really nice about this machine is I really like it's got a mechanical N14, and I mean it's just a good running engine. And this thing's been setting, he said, for almost a whole year, and I got in it and it just started right up. I got the battery disconnect just like a Cat. I turned the battery disconnect on, didn't have to jump it or anything, it just fired right up. So, and we've had a pretty cold, hard winter, so I was pretty impressed with that. But we'll get going here and get this one pad off here where the alligator is, break this track here. As you can see, you'll see here, I had a fun time getting this one loose. So you want to start off on these Cats here, you know, even anything with a grease tension cylinder like this with the track tensions, you know, get the access cover off. This one's nice because it's just got that little square plate there, and I actually kind of like that on the side like that better than the Cats, because the Cats seems like you always had to dig about 20 pounds of dirt off because it's set up on top, you know, all the dirt set up there between the rollers, the upper rollers, and the that cover there. But take that off and you'll see your grease zerk fitting there to tighten it up. Well, there'll be a plug right beside it. Just pull the plug out, and it shouldn't be under that much pressure, so don't worry about that. Just pull that plug out, and what we'll do here shortly, I'll show you, is we'll end up taking a block and sticking up underneath one of the front grousers and just gently using the Cat forward. Now usually will shove that idler back to where you can you know, collapse that cylinder and shove it, but it'll make a damn mess and shove a bunch of grease out everywhere, but there's no way around that. But if you're out in the woods somewhere and you got a log shovel or an excavator or something like that, you can also, you know, take the bucket of the excavator and just get out and shove that idler back with the bucket too. I've done that quite a few times instead of ruining my blocks. Sometimes I kind of get fond of my blocks because they're good blocks and you hate to ruin them, and you put them underneath one of them grousers and you run over it, and it usually gets the job done, but it usually destroys your good block that you usually used to jack stuff up with and block stuff up with. But
you get your front idler and smash the block.
Yeah, and come to think of it, if you don't have a block, I mean, anything will work. I mean, if you got a big rock, you can shove it in front of it or anything to hit it and make that idler collapse itself. And you know, you got to get enough slack in that track so you can. It's a hell of a lot easier trying to get it back together with some slack in the track. I wish there was a little better view there, but the blade arm's kind of in the way, but it worked out pretty good. You can see the top there is slacked. I'm going to try to jump up in there, and it shoved the block in the ground about 2 feet, but we're going to back up and try to hit it again, see if we can just slack her just a little more there and make it. I mean, the more slack you can get in this thing, I mean, it'll make your life a lot easier putting that back together. This bolt here, man, would not come out, and part of the problem is I never have set my impact wrench up right. I was usually these 1-inch guns, you know, you need to run at least a 1/2 inch, 3/8 or 1/2 inch hose off it. I'm running a 1/4 inch hose off of it. It's just not enough volume. So there's a whole lot more to the story here that I don't show in the video. This thing kind of turned out to be a nightmare. I got this one bolt out eventually here with the hose setup that I've got, but I got underneath, and the bolts on the inside rollers, on the insides of the rollers there, wouldn't come loose. I mean, just wouldn't come loose, and I fought them and fought them and fought them. Well, finally I loaded all my stuff up, and it was on a Sunday, and I went to about 3 different places in town, and I actually found all the fittings and hose, and I went ahead and just plumbed my air compressor and redid all that and got it plumbed for 1/2 inch hose, and they still came out pretty tough, but it took them out. So made a hell of a difference switching that thing over and getting the bigger hose on it. I don't know if anybody's ever had one of them happen, or my hose barked onto my impact wrench. It blew off, and luckily it didn't beat me to death, but I got her shut off. I got a ball valve on my air compressor, so you gotta have a good ball valve on there. You can shut that off so you can stop the flow of air. As you can see here, I just kind of the whole point of this video was one of my buddies told me, said, oh, he used to work for CAT a long time ago, and he basically told me there, when I told him what I was going to go do, he says, you can't change them rollers without pulling that undercarriage. And I told him, I said, I do it all the time. I don't know what they taught you at CAT. I think they teach some of these guys the wrong thing at some of these dealers. I really do. You know, some of these dealers teach these guys to do things the long way so they can charge people more. You know, you don't have to pull that whole undercarriage to change those lower rollers. I mean, I've done them up in the middle of the woods and the mud and the snow, and it's kind of a pain in the butt sometimes to do. But, I mean, versus pulling that undercarriage clear out of there, it saves you an immense amount of time just doing it this way. So, I don't know, it just seems like to me that sometimes them dealers kind of, they try to create some work for themselves, you know, so they can charge people more. I had a customer the other day that he called me on a 9430T John Deere, and he said my steering's stiff on my tractor here. I said, oh, okay. And he says, well, the dealer told me, I called them, and they told me that they need to haul it to they need to lowboy the tractor to their shop. But anybody that knows anything and knows how much lowboy rates are, and I knew that it was going to be $1,000 trip each way. So there's a couple $1,000s, you know, because he was about probably a good 150 miles from the dealer. So, you know, there's probably at least $1,000 each way there. And then on top of that, they told him that we're going to have to pull the cab and put a steering pump in it. And I told the owner, I says, well, I don't know who you talked to, that's not what's wrong with that tractor. The steering wheel hooks to 3 steering sensors. That's all electric. There's a steering shaft that going from your steering column down below the cab to a steering input assembly that has 3 sensors on it. And those sensors tell the steering controller what position the steering wheel's in, and then the steering controller tells the steering pump where to turn through, you know, some solenoids on the pump, the servos. So, you know, I said, I don't know who told you that, but they're full of shit. So he told me to come down there and look at it. And so I went down there, and this is kind of funny. I pulled the yoke off the steering shaft, popped it loose, and it turned really freely because there's an upper bearing up there in the steering column, and then there's a bearing down below in the steering input assembly. So I popped the steering input assembly off. There's 2 bolts. It took me about 10 minutes. Popped it off. There's a sealed bearing there. I popped the sealed bearing out of the steering input assembly, and the little dust cover on it, I squirted some penetrating oil in there, got it freed up, squished some grease in there, put the dust seal back on it, stuck it back in there, and I think I charged the guy 1 hour for $90, you know, and he was just so happy about that. But just, you know, that whole story there is basically to emphasize that some of these dealers, you know, they tell these guys a bunch of crap, and then they haul these tractors clear over there, and they charge them a $10,000 bill, and then all the low boy haul fees and all this stuff, and all it was a $13 sealed bearing. So I just can't believe. I was just completely amazed that guy told him that it was the steering pump that was bad on it, and he obviously, I don't know if he was intentionally trying to mislead him and get some work created for the dealer, or he just didn't know what the hell he was talking about, you know. So, which is actually, I'm kind of glad he did it, because this guy's calling me all the time now, so it was good for me, you know. So keep on doing it, man. I don't mind. But anyway, another thing I wanted to say, I appreciate you guys subscribing to my channel, and I appreciate you guys watching my videos. And if you guys keep on watching, we'll have plenty of good videos to come. So thanks for watching.